I took the job at Grand Canyon National Park because my grandmother left me $17,000 in medical debt and a letter that said I should have been a ranger like my father. The debt won, mostly. The ranger part felt like finishing something he'd started before the accident on Route 66 took him when I was 9. They flew me into Flagstaff in early March when the rim still held snow in the shadows, and the tour buses hadn't started their summer migrations. A supervisor named Garrett met me at the small airport with a park service truck that had 214,000 miles on it and a crack across the windshield that looked like a lightning bolt. He was Hopi, maybe 60, with hands that looked like they'd spent decades gripping tools and steering wheels. "You're Little Feathers, kid," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." He was solid, knew the back country better than anyone. Garrett handed me a manila folder. "You'll be stationed at Desert View, East Rim. Quieter than the main village. We need someone who can handle overnight rotations." The folder contained my assignment paperwork, a facility map, 3 pages of standard protocols, and a separate document printed on different paper, older stock, slightly yellowed. The header read, "Supplemental Guidelines for Desert View Night Operations." "Read everything before your first overnight," Garrett said. "The supplemental list especially. Every word matters. These aren't in the standard manual. They're specific to Desert View, site conditions." He drove north toward the park, through ponderosa forest that gave way to pinyon and juniper as we climbed. The watchtower's been there since 1932. Mary Coulter designed it to look like ancestral Puebloan ruins. 4 stories, observation deck at 70 feet. Beautiful work. But the site has particular needs. Needs. You'll see. Just follow the supplemental list exactly. Don't improvise. Don't test exceptions. And if you're not sure about something, radio channel 14 and wait for me to respond. Not channel 6, channel 14. We drove another 40 minutes in silence. The canyon appeared gradually, first as a suggestion of depth beyond the trees, then as the full geological revelation. Bands of Kaibab limestone giving way to Coconino sandstone, down through Hermit Shale and Supai Group, all the way to the Vishnu schist at the bottom, nearly 2 billion years old and dark as dried blood. I'd seen photographs. Photographs meant nothing. Desert View sat at the eastern entrance, 7 miles from the main visitor center. The watchtower rose from the rim like something that had always been there, its stone walls the color of the canyon itself. A small ranger residence stood 200 yards west, connected by a dirt service road. A supply shed, a tool cache, and a composting toilet structure formed a loose compound another 50 yards beyond that. Garrett parked at the residence, a single-story prefab with green metal siding built maybe in the 70s. "You're alone most nights. Day rangers leave at 6 p.m., back at 7 a.m. Weekends we have a second overnight, but weekdays it's you. Supply runs every Monday and Thursday, weather permitting. You have a satellite phone for emergencies, but cell service is non-existent." He walked me through the residence. Kitchen with a propane stove, bathroom with a shower that ran on a solar water heater, bedroom with a twin bed and a footlocker, a main room with a desk, a VHF radio base station, and a topographic map of the Eastern Canyon marked with colored pins I didn't understand yet. "Locker's yours. Last guy left some stuff. You can toss it or keep it." Garrett set a ring of keys on the desk. 12 keys, each labeled with a number and a location code. Tower main, tower storage, shed A, shed B, tool cache, residence, north gate, equipment locker, generator room, first aid station, water tank access, and supply closet. Count them now. I counted. 12 keys. Good. Every night before your rounds, count them again. If a key is missing, radio channel 14 immediately. Do not search for it yourself. What would happen if... Read the supplemental list. He pointed at the folder. Everything's in there. I'm heading back to the village. Your first overnight starts tomorrow at 6 p.m. Use today to familiarize yourself with the site. Walk the perimeter in daylight. Check all the locks. Test the radio on all channels. Make sure the emergency supplies are stocked. The checklist's in the desk. Garrett, I said, what exactly am I watching for out here? He looked at me for a long moment. Compliance, he said. You're watching for compliance, with the rules. He left. I heard the truck rattle down the access road and fade into the distance, and then there was only the wind moving through the pinyon pines and the distant sound of ravens calling from the rim. I unpacked my duffel bag and opened the footlocker. The previous ranger had left a fleece jacket with a name tag that said Ortiz, a half-empty bottle of ibuprofen, a flashlight with dead batteries, and a small notebook. The notebook had entries dated from October to February, 6 months of shifts. Most pages contained routine notes. Clear night, 28 degrees, no incidents. High winds, secured shed doors. Visitors reported at tower after hours, issued warnings. The last entry, dated February 14th, was different. 3:17 a.m., heard footsteps circling residence clockwise, counted 94 steps before they stopped at the north wall. Waited 12 minutes, no further sounds. Did not open door. Followed amended protocol 7. Below that, in different ink, requesting transfer. Personal reasons. I closed the notebook and opened the supplemental guidelines. Supplemental Guidelines for Desert View Night Operations. Section 1. Core Protocols. These protocols are mandatory for all overnight shifts at Desert View. Deviation may result in injury, equipment loss, or site closure. Memorize this list. A printed copy must remain on your person during all overnight hours. 1. Lock the residence door at exactly 6:15 p.m. Check the lock 3 times. Do not open the door again until sunrise except as specified in Protocol 6. 2. At 6:30 p.m., conduct a full perimeter check of the watchtower moving clockwise from the main entrance. Verify all public access doors are locked. Count the doors. There are 4. If you count 5, do not enter the tower. Return to the residence and radio channel 14. 3. Between 8 p.m. and 8:15 p.m., inventory the emergency supplies in the residence storage closet. The list is on the inside door. There should be 16 items. If any item is missing, note it in the log. If an extra item appears that is not on the list, do not touch it. Close the door and continue your shift normally. 4. Do not respond to knocking at the residence door between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. If someone identifies themselves as park staff, do not respond. If they use your name, do not respond. If they claim there is an emergency, use the radio on channel 14 to verify. Do not open the door to verify visually. 5. At 11:45 p.m., check the tower lights. From the residence, you should see 3 lights visible in the tower windows: observation level, 2nd floor north window, and ground floor entry. If you see 4 lights, note the location of the 4th in your log. If you see fewer than 3, proceed to Protocol 12. 6. If you must exit the residence between midnight and 4:30 a.m., carry the emergency whistle and the flashlight with the red lens. Walk at a measured pace. Do not run. If you hear footsteps behind you that match your pace exactly, stop walking for 30 seconds. If the footsteps continue while you are stopped, return to the residence immediately using the same path you exited. Do not look behind you. 7. Between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., you may hear voices from the direction of the canyon rim. These will sound like visitors in distress. Do not approach the rim during this window. At 2:31 a.m., you may conduct a visual check from the residence porch using binoculars. If you see individuals on the rim trail, wait until 3 a.m., then approach and offer assistance using standard protocols. If you see individuals beyond the rim fence, do not approach. Radio Channel 14. 8. Monitor Channel 6 for standard park communications. Monitor Channel 14 for site-specific communications. If you hear traffic on Channel 14 that you did not initiate, listen but do not respond unless the message includes your full name and badge number. 9. Do not enter the watchtower between midnight and 5 a.m. unless required by emergency protocol. If entry is required, use only the main entrance. Announce yourself clearly before entering. Night Ranger on duty, entering for emergency check. Wait 10 seconds, then proceed. 10. The tool shed, designated as Shed B, should remain locked at all times. You do not have a reason to open Shed B during overnight shifts. If you find Shed B unlocked, do not enter. Lock it from the outside and note the time in your log. 11. At 3:30 a.m., conduct a radio check on Channel 14. Use this phrasing exactly. Desert View Night, 3:30 check. Wait for response. Acceptable responses are copy Desert View, status clear, or copy Desert View, standing by. Any other response requires you to immediately secure the residence and wait for dawn. Do not investigate. 12. If at any point you observe a person wearing Park Service uniform whom you did not see arrive by vehicle, do not approach them. Observe from a distance. If they attempt to enter any locked structure, radio Channel 14. Do not engage in conversation. Real staff will understand. 13. Keep the residence interior lights on from 6 p.m. until sunrise. If a light burns out, replace it immediately. If you run out of bulbs, use the emergency lantern. Do not remain in darkness. 14. At 5:30 a.m., conduct a final perimeter check, moving counterclockwise from the residence. Count your steps. The full circuit should be between 200 and 210 steps. If the count is outside this range, repeat the check once. If the count remains outside the range, note it in the log. Section 2. Day-to-day operations. All standard park protocols apply during daylight hours. Visitor services, educational programs, and routine maintenance follow normal procedures. The supplemental protocols above apply only during overnight shifts defined as 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Section 3. Emergency contacts. For life-threatening emergencies, use the satellite phone to contact park dispatch. For site-specific issues, use Channel 14 to contact the site supervisor. Do not use Channel 14 for routine matters or personal communication. I read the list 4 times. Then I read it again. The language was precise, operational, testable. Nothing about why these protocols existed. Nothing about what happened if you broke them. Just the procedures themselves laid out like assembly instructions for a piece of machinery. I checked my watch. 3:40 p.m. 2 hours and 20 minutes until my shift started. I decided to use the time to walk the site in daylight, to anchor the geography in my mind before darkness changed everything. The perimeter check took me past the watchtower first. Mary Coulter's design was brilliant. It genuinely looked ancient, with irregular stonework and small windows that seemed punched through thick walls rather than framed with modern precision. The main entrance faced east, toward the parking area. I counted doors as I circled clockwise. Main entrance, service door on the south side, storage access on the west side, and a narrow maintenance door on the north side. 4 doors. I tested each lock, all secure. The residence sat west of the tower, 208 yards by my pacing. I counted carefully. The tool cache and Shed A were maintenance buildings with standard equipment: shovels, rope, a ladder, a wheelbarrow, tarps. Shed B was smaller, windowless, with a heavy padlock that looked newer than the structure itself. I checked the lock. Secure. The rim trail ran along the canyon edge, protected by a split-rail fence that wouldn't stop anyone determined to go over. Signs every 50 feet. Stay behind fence. Unstable edge. The drop was immediate and vertical for the first 100 feet, then broken by ledges and talus slopes that descended in stages for another mile before reaching the inner gorge. I walked to the fence and looked down. The canyon was already filling with shadow, the far rim still bright with late sun. The Colorado River was invisible from this angle, hidden behind multiple folds of stone. Ravens circled below me, their calls echoing strangely in the vast space. Something about the light quality made distances hard to judge. A ledge that looked 30 feet below might have been 60. A crack in the rock face seemed to shift as I watched, resolving into a shallow chimney, then flattening back into a shadow. I walked back to the residence as the sun touched the horizon. The temperature was already dropping. I went inside, locked the door, and checked my watch. 6:12 p.m. At 6:15 exactly, I locked the door again and checked it 3 times. The deadbolt was solid. The door fit tight in its frame. My first overnight had begun. At 6:30, I conducted the perimeter check, moving clockwise from the tower. The parking lot was empty. The last day visitors had left an hour ago. I counted doors. 4. I tested each lock. Secure. The tower cast a long shadow across the compound, reaching toward the canyon. At 8 p.m., I opened the storage closet in the residence. The inventory list was taped to the inside of the door, printed in faded ink. 1. Emergency medical kit. 2. Fire extinguisher. 3. Emergency blankets. 3. 4. Portable radio backup. 5. Flashlights. 2. 6. Batteries. D-cell 12 count. 7. Batteries. AA 12 count. 8. Emergency whistle. 9. Road flares. 6. 10. Water. Gallon jugs. 3. 11. MREs. 5. 12. First aid manual. 13. Satellite phone. 14. Hand crank weather radio. 15. Rope. 50 FT. 16. Emergency space heater. I checked each item, all present. Nothing extra. I closed the door. At 9:30, I made coffee and sat at the desk, reading through the standard park materials, visitor statistics, wildlife information, geological history. The VHF radio on the desk hissed quietly on Channel 6, occasionally crackling with distant traffic from the main village. At 10:15, someone knocked on the door. 3 measured knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks. I froze with my coffee cup halfway to my mouth. The knocks came again. Same pattern, same measured pace. I set down the cup silently. My hand moved toward the radio, then stopped. The protocol was clear. Do not respond to knocking between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. The knocking continued. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Over and over with mechanical precision, not the pattern of someone who needed help, not the urgency of emergency, just 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. I looked at my watch. 10:17 p.m. The knocking stopped. I sat in the silence, listening to my own breathing and the hiss of the radio. My heart was beating faster than it should. It was just someone who didn't know the protocols, I told myself. A confused visitor, a hiker who'd stayed too late on the trails, but I hadn't heard a vehicle. At 11:45, I turned off the interior lights and stepped onto the small porch to check the tower. The night was moonless, the stars harsh and bright. The tower rose against them like a cutout in black paper. I counted lights in the tower windows. Ground floor entrance, 1. Second floor north window, 2. Observation level, 3. 3 lights. Correct. I went back inside, turned on the lights, and noted the check in my log. 11:45 p.m. Tower lights verified, 3 visible, no anomalies. At 1:30 a.m. I heard footsteps outside. They were moving clockwise around the residence, crunching on the gravel that surrounded the structure. Steady, measured steps. Not hurrying, not stopping. I sat at the desk and counted. 20 steps along the south wall, turn. 24 steps along the west wall, turn. 20 steps along the north wall, turn. 24 steps along the east wall, turn. The footsteps began the circuit again. I counted 5 complete circuits. 176 steps total. Then they stopped at what I calculated was the northeast corner of the building. I waited. My watch showed 1:42 a.m. No further sounds. At 2:15 a.m., I heard voices from the direction of the canyon. They were faint, distorted by wind and distance. They sounded like someone calling for help. I looked at my watch. 2:17 a.m., Protocol 7. Between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., you may hear voices from the direction of the canyon rim. Do not approach the rim during this window. I stayed in the residence. The voices continued rising and falling. Sometimes they sounded like one person, sometimes like several. The words were almost clear, but not quite, like hearing conversation through a wall. At 2:31, I took the binoculars from the equipment locker and stepped onto the porch. I scanned the rim trail systematically left to right. Nothing. No movement, no lights. The voices had stopped. I went back inside and noted it in the log. At 3:30 a.m., I picked up the radio mic and switched to channel 14. Desert View Night, 3:30 check. Static. Then, copy Desert View, status clear. Garrett's voice calm and unhurried. I felt tension drain from my shoulders that I hadn't realized was there. Copy, I said, standing by. At 5:30 a.m., with the sky lightening in the east, I conducted the final perimeter check, moving counterclockwise from the residence. I counted steps carefully. 206 steps. Within range. I returned to the residence, made more coffee, and watched the sun rise over the canyon. The light changed everything. The tower became stone and mortar again. The rim trail was empty dirt and wooden fences. The compound looked exactly like what it was, a national park facility in need of updated paint. At 6:45, the day rangers arrived, 2 of them in a Park Service truck that announced itself from a quarter-mile away. I unlocked the door and met them outside. Neither commented on the fact that I looked tired or that I'd gone through half a pot of coffee. Quiet night? The older one asked. Her name tag said Chen. Followed protocols, I said, no incidents. She nodded like this was exactly what she'd expected to hear. Good. Garrett said you were solid. They went about their day shift duties. I ate breakfast, tried to sleep, and mostly stared at the ceiling, thinking about footsteps that circled a building exactly 5 times and then stopped. Over the next 2 weeks, I settled into the rhythm of overnight shifts. Weekdays alone, weekends with a second ranger named Mike who was ex-military and didn't ask unnecessary questions. The protocols became routine. Lock the door at 6:15, check 3 times, perimeter clockwise, inventory at 8 p.m., monitor through the night. Radio check at 3:30, final perimeter counterclockwise at 5:30. I followed every protocol exactly. Most nights were quiet. A few involved knocking, always the same pattern, always between 10 and 11 p.m. Once I heard something scraping along the south wall of the residence around midnight. I didn't investigate. Twice I counted 4 lights in the tower instead of 3 and noted it in the log. The 4th light was always in a different location, once in the basement window that shouldn't have been visible from ground level, once in the observation deck on the south side where there was no fixture. The voices from the rim came every night between 2 and 2:30 a.m. I stopped finding them unnerving. They became part of the landscape, like wind or the sounds of settling wood. On a Thursday afternoon in late March, Garrett arrived with the supply truck. He reviewed my logs at the desk while I unloaded boxes of food and equipment. Good reports, he said. You're following procedures exactly, no improvisation. They're clear enough. He pulled out a second document, this one printed on the same yellowed paper as the original. Site conditions have been active this month. We're implementing amendments to the core protocols. Read these before tonight's shift. They're additive. You still follow the original 14. Supplemental Guidelines. Amendment Protocols. Effective March 27th. Append to Core Protocols. 15. If you observe any animal on the property between dusk and dawn, do not approach it. Common animals at Desert View include mule deer, elk, coyotes, and ravens. If you see any of these animals moving in reverse, walking backward, flying backward, maintain distance and return to the residence. Do not photograph or record the animal. 16. The service road from the highway to Desert View is 3.4 miles long. If your odometer shows a different distance during night arrival or departure, note it in your log. Do not attempt to reconcile the discrepancy. 17. Between midnight and 4 a.m., shadows inside the residence should correspond to the position of interior lights. If you observe a shadow that does not match any object or person, turn on additional lights. If the shadow persists, note its location in your log but do not investigate further. 18. If the radio on channel 14 produces traffic that includes your name but uses incorrect information, wrong badge number, wrong assignment dates, wrong supervisor name, do not correct the error verbally. Instead, key the mic 3 times without speaking, wait 10 seconds and switch to receive-only mode. 19. At 1 a.m., verify that all 12 keys are present on your ring. Count them twice. If the count is incorrect, secure the residence and radio channel 14 immediately. Do not search for missing keys or attempt to determine the origin of extra keys. 20. If you observe lights on the far rim of the canyon, the north rim between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., this is normal. The north rim lodges are visible from Desert View. However, if the lights appear to be moving in organized patterns or approaching closer, radio channel 14. 21. Shed B should remain locked at all times. However, if you observe the door to Shed B standing open during an overnight shift, do not approach it to close it. Radio channel 14 and wait for instruction. Do not look into the shed from a distance. Do not attempt to determine what, if anything, is inside. 22. If you complete your counterclockwise perimeter check at 5:30 a.m. and your step count is more than 30 steps outside the acceptable range, do not enter the residence until sunrise. Wait on the porch. If your step count is more than 50 steps outside the range, walk to the parking area and wait in a vehicle until day staff arrives. 23. The satellite phone is for emergencies only. If the phone rings during overnight hours, do not answer it. The phone should not receive calls. It is not configured for incoming calls. If it rings more than 3 times, disconnect the battery. 24. Food waste should be secured in the bear-proof container behind the residence. Empty the container every 3 days minimum. If you find the container open or damaged, do not approach within 10 feet. Note it in your log. Day staff will handle wildlife issues. 25. If at any time you feel compelled to walk toward the canyon rim during overnight hours for no logical reason, resist this impulse. Return to the residence immediately and secure the door. Note the time and your location when the impulse began. This impulse may feel like remembering something urgent, like concern for someone's safety or like curiosity about a specific sound or light. It is none of these things. "What's in Shed B?" I asked. Garrett folded the amendment list. "Nothing you need to access, but something's in there. Equipment, old materials, some things Mary Coulter left when she finished the tower." He met my eyes. "Shed B doesn't involve you. The protocol is simple. Keep it locked, and if you find it open, don't go in. That's all you need to know." He left the amendments on the desk and carried a box of supplies to the storage closet. I read the list again, particularly Protocol 25. The specificity of it bothered me. The idea that the impulse might feel like remembered urgency or concern for safety. That suggested someone had felt those things. Someone had tested that boundary. That night, I followed the amended protocols along with the original 14. At 1 a.m., I counted my keys, 12 present. At 2:15, the voices came from the rim right on schedule. At 3:30, my radio check was answered with copy Desert View, status clear. At 4:47 a.m., I heard something large moving near the residence. Heavy footfalls, slow and deliberate. They approached from the direction of the parking area, passed along the south side of the building, and continued toward the canyon rim. I went to the window and looked out carefully, keeping back from the glass. An elk, a bull, maybe 600 pounds, with antlers that looked black in the starlight. It was walking backward. The elk moved with perfect coordination, as if it had always moved this way. Its legs bent at the right joints in the right sequence. It didn't stumble or look awkward. It simply walked backward, step by careful step, toward the rim trail. I watched until it passed beyond the fence and disappeared down the trail that shouldn't have supported something that large moving in reverse. I noted it in the log. 4:47 a.m. Bull elk observed walking backward toward rim trail. Maintained distance as per protocol 15. At dawn, the elk was gone. The day rangers found nothing unusual on the rim trail. Chen mentioned that elk had been active this week. They'd found fresh tracks near the water tank. Normal tracks. Forward-facing. In April, the tourist season began in earnest. Day shifts became busy with visitors wanting to climb the tower, walk the rim trail, take photographs. I interacted with dozens of people daily before my 6 p.m. lockdown. Families with children, retirees with expensive cameras, international visitors who spoke limited English but universal awe. The overnight hours remained separate from all that. Once the day rangers left and I locked the residence door, the site became something different. Not hostile exactly, not even unfriendly, just separate, operating under different rules. I learned to read the patterns. The knocking usually came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The footsteps that circled the building were more common during the new moon. The voices from the rim were loudest when the wind blew from the north. These observations were subjective, unscientific, and probably meaningless. But pattern recognition was a survival trait, so I noted them anyway. On April 18th, I met the other overnight ranger during a weekend shift. His name was Mike, 42, originally from Vermont. He'd been at the park for 3 years, 2 of them at Desert View. "You settling in okay?" he asked. We were conducting the 8 p.m. inventory together. "Following procedures." "Good, that's all it takes. Follow the list, don't improvise, go home at the end of your contract." He counted batteries. 12 D cells, correct. "You ever wonder why the procedures are so specific?" "Every day at first. Then I stopped wondering and started sleeping better." He closed the storage closet. "I'll tell you what Garrett told me. This site has been occupied for thousands of years. Different people, different purposes. The canyon's been sacred, strategic, and commercial at various points. All that human attention leaves patterns. Sometimes the patterns persist. We're just maintaining good practice. Do you believe that? Doesn't matter what I believe. I believe the procedures work. That's enough." We split the night in 4-hour shifts. Mike took 6 to 10 p.m. and 2 to 6 a.m. I took 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. It was easier with 2 people. The knocking that night only came once, and Mike was in the main room when it happened. He didn't even look up from his book. "Tuesday," he said. "Happens every Tuesday around 10:15. Been doing it since January. Doesn't it bother you? Would it bother me if a coyote howled at the same time every night? It's just a pattern. Patterns don't bother me. Changes to patterns bother me." At 3:30 a.m., I conducted the radio check. Desert View night 3:30 check. Copy Desert View, status clear. Mike nodded approvingly. "Garrett's always up. Every night 3:30 exactly. Man doesn't sleep." "What happens if he doesn't answer?" Follow Protocol 11, secure the residence and wait for dawn. Has that happened? Not to me, not to anyone I know. But the protocol exists, so it must have happened once. That was the logic of the supplemental list. Every procedure existed because someone at some point had needed it. The protocols were a historical record written in preventive instructions. In May, a family of 4 arrived at Desert View just before 6 p.m. closing. Day Ranger Chen tried to redirect them to come back the next day, but they'd driven from Albuquerque specifically to see the sunset from the tower. The father was insistent. They were only in Arizona for one night. Chen looked at me. Can they stay for 30 minutes just through sunset? I'll lock up the tower after they come down. Protocol 2 was clear. Conduct perimeter check at 6:30 moving clockwise. But the protocol assumed the site was clear. This was a judgment call. 30 minutes, I said. I'll wait to start the perimeter check until they're out. The family climbed the tower. I watched them through binoculars from the residence porch. 2 parents, a teenage daughter, a son maybe 10 years old. They reached the observation deck at 6:18 p.m., spread out to different compass points, took photos. Normal tourist behavior. At 6:42, they started down. At 6:46, the parents exited the tower. They waited by the entrance. At 6:51, the parents looked at each other, confused. The mother called up the stairs, "Emma, Tyler, time to go." No response. The father went back inside. I could see him through the ground floor windows, calling up the stairwell. I checked my watch. 6:57 p.m. Chen was still in the parking area waiting to lock the tower. I radioed her on Channel 6. Situation at the tower. 2 juveniles still inside. Chen went in. Through the binoculars, I saw her flashlight beam moving on the 2nd floor, then the 3rd floor, then the observation deck. 5 minutes passed. Chen emerged with 2 confused teenagers. The daughter was crying. The son looked dazed. The family left, the father angry, the mother comforting the daughter. Chen locked the tower and walked to the residence. She looked shaken. They were on the 3rd floor, she said, just standing there facing the wall. Not moving, not responding when I called them. I had to physically turn the girl around. When she saw me, she started crying, said she didn't remember walking down from the observation deck. Medical issue? No history of seizures, according to the parents. No drugs or alcohol, no medical conditions. The kids just said they felt like they should go downstairs, and then they were standing on the 3rd floor staring at the wall and didn't know how long they'd been there. I thought about Protocol 25. If at any time you feel compelled to walk toward the canyon rim during overnight hours for no logical reason, resist this impulse. I need to file an incident report, Chen said. You need to note it in your log, and Garrett needs to know. I called Garrett on Channel 14. He listened without interrupting. The family okay? He asked. Shaken, no injuries. Good. Chen, include all details in your report. Night Ranger, note it, but don't speculate. I'll review in the morning. He paused. Both of you. Standard closing procedures from now on. No exceptions for sunset viewers. Site clears at 6 p.m. sharp. No flexibility. That night I conducted my perimeter check at 7:15 p.m., 90 minutes late. When I reached the tower and counted doors, I counted 5. I stopped, backed up, counted again. 5 doors. Main entrance on the east, service door on the south, storage access on the west, maintenance door on the north, and a 5th door on the southwest corner that shouldn't exist. The 5th door was the same style as the others. Heavy wood with iron hardware set into the stone wall. It looked original, like it had always been there. I returned to the residence without entering the tower. I radioed Channel 14. Desert View night. Protocol 2 variants. Counted 5 doors on tower perimeter. Long pause, then Garrett's voice, very calm. Copy. Location of the 5th door? southwest corner, ground level. Do not approach it. Do not attempt entry. Continue standard overnight protocols. I'll be there at dawn. Understood. You did exactly right. Lock down and follow the list. I spent the night at the desk, monitoring the tower through binoculars. The 3 required lights were visible. The 5th door never opened. Nothing approached it or emerged from it. At 5:30, I conducted my final perimeter check, counterclockwise. I counted doors as I passed. 4. The 5th door was gone. Garrett arrived at 6:30 a.m. with the day shift. We walked the tower perimeter together in full daylight. 4 doors, all original. No evidence of a 5th entrance, no marks in the stone where one might have been. This happens, Garrett said. Not often, maybe once a year. The site has flexible geometry sometimes. You followed procedure perfectly, counted, observed, reported, didn't engage. That's the correct response. What would have happened if I'd tried to open the 5th door? We don't know. Nobody's tried. He looked at me. That's why the protocols exist, to keep people from finding out. A week later, Garrett brought updated emergency protocols. Supplemental guidelines, emergency protocols. For use during extended adverse conditions. Severe weather, power failure, communication loss, or site-specific incidents requiring lockdown. These protocols supersede normal operations. Activate only when instructed by site supervisor or when conditions prevent standard protocol completion. Protocol E1. If you must shelter in place for longer than 12 hours, ration supplies according to the emergency supply list. Do not leave the residence except as required by protocols E3 and E4. Protocol E2. During active lockdown, monitor channel 14 every hour on the hour. If no traffic is heard for 3 consecutive hours, switch to channel 6 and attempt to raise any park station. If no response on any channel for 6 consecutive hours, assume communication failure and proceed with isolation protocols. Protocol E3. If weather or site conditions prevent the 5:30 a.m. perimeter check, delay until conditions improve, but do not delay past 8 a.m. If conditions do not improve by 8 a.m., conduct a visual check from the residence only, document and wait for day staff or supervisor contact. Protocol E4. During power failure, maintain at least 2 light sources active in the residence at all times. Primary lantern and backup flashlight minimum. If all battery-powered lights fail, use chemical light sticks from the emergency supplies. Do not allow the residents to remain in complete darkness for more than 2 minutes. Protocol E5. If you must conduct emergency egress from the site during overnight hours, use the service road only. Do not attempt to exit via the rim trails or cross-country routes. If the service road is impassable, shelter in the residence and wait for assistance. Radio your situation on channel 14 every 30 minutes. The emergency protocols felt heavier than the others, more final. They were procedures for when the normal procedures failed. I read them carefully and stored them with the original list and the amendments. On May 23rd, the emergency protocols were tested. A spring storm moved in from the southwest at 4:30 p.m., 2 hours before my shift started. By 6 p.m., the wind was gusting to 60 miles per hour and the temperature had dropped to 38 degrees. Lightning struck the rim in visible forks, close enough that I could smell ozone. The power failed at 6:42 p.m. The residents had a backup generator, but protocol said not to start it unless necessary for safety. I used the emergency lanterns instead, one in the main room, one in the bedroom. Chemical light sticks in the bathroom and kitchen. I conducted the 8 p.m. inventory by flashlight, all items present. The wind made the building creak and shudder. At 9:15, the radio on channel 6 went dead. I switched to channel 14, still receiving static, which meant the repeater was working but no traffic was coming through. At 10 p.m., the knocking came. Same pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. But louder tonight, more insistent. The knocking continued for 7 minutes, then stopped. At 11:45, I couldn't check the tower lights. The storm was too thick, visibility less than 50 feet. At midnight, I heard something hit the south wall of the residence. Not wind. Something solid, thrown or propelled. A second impact. A third. I went to the south window and looked out. The lightning gave me strobed glimpses. Branches from the pinyon pines broken and scattered across the compound. The wind was taking the trees apart piece by piece. At 1 a.m., I counted my keys. 12 present. At 1:30, I heard the footsteps again circling the residence. But tonight they were faster, urgent, almost running. They completed 3 circuits and stopped. Then the scratching began. Something was scraping at the north wall of the residence, rhythmic and deliberate, not wind-blown debris. Something applying sustained pressure back and forth, like it was testing the wall's integrity. I moved to the desk and picked up the radio. Desert View night, emergency traffic, storm conditions severe, unknown contact with north wall of residence requesting guidance. Static, I tried again. Desert View night on channel 14, Garrett, if you copy, please respond. Nothing. I checked my watch. 1:48 a.m., 6 hours and 12 minutes until dawn. The scratching continued. At 2 a.m., the voices from the rim started, but tonight they were different. They weren't calling for help. They were calling my name. Not my full name. My first name. Over and over, just barely audible under the wind. Protocol 7. Between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., you may hear voices from the direction of the canyon rim. Do not approach the rim during this window. I stayed in the residence. The voices continued. My name spoken in my father's voice. I sat at the desk and focused on my breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. A meditation technique I'd learned in college. It kept me anchored. At 2:31, I should have checked the rim with binoculars, but visibility was near 0. I documented the variance in my log. At 3:30 a.m., I tried the radio check. Desert View night, 3:30 check. Static. No response. I waited 2 minutes and tried again. Still nothing. Protocol E2. If no traffic is heard for 3 consecutive hours, switch to channel 6 and attempt to raise any park station. I switched to channel 6. Any park station, this is Desert View Night Ranger with emergency traffic. Radio check, please respond. More static, then faint. Desert View, copy. Status? Not Garrett's voice. Younger, unclear. This is Desert View Night Ranger. Storm conditions severe, communication intermittent, structure secure. Requesting confirmation of day staff arrival schedule. Long pause, then maintain, dawn, staff en route. The signal dissolved into static. At 3:55 a.m., the scratching stopped. At 4:30 a.m., the storm began to ease. The wind dropped from sustained screaming to intermittent gusts. The lightning moved east. At 5:30 a.m., I attempted the perimeter check. The compound was a debris field, branches, pine cones, a section of fence railing. I couldn't complete the circuit safely in the dark. I documented the variance and waited. At 6:15 a.m., with enough light to see, I walked the perimeter counterclockwise. 232 steps, well outside the acceptable range. I stood in the parking area and waited. At 6:48, Garrett arrived in a truck with chains on the tires, accompanied by Chen and 2 maintenance staff. You okay? Garrett asked. Followed protocols, building secure, radio was intermittent. We lost the repeater around midnight. Just got it back 20 minutes ago. He looked at the debris. Hell of a storm. You did good staying put. We walked the residence perimeter together. On the north wall at chest height, there were scratches in the metal siding. Long parallel marks like something with claws had scraped back and forth. The marks were fresh, bright metal exposed under the green paint. Bears? I asked. Garrett studied the marks. Wrong pattern, wrong height, but we'll document it as wildlife contact. He looked at me. You didn't go outside? No, sir. Stayed inside, lights on, followed emergency protocols. Good. The maintenance crew cleared debris while I wrote my report. When I described the voices calling my name in my father's voice, Garrett didn't look surprised. It uses familiar voices, he said. Whatever the mechanism is, probably some acoustic property of the canyon, wind patterns, psychological fatigue. The important thing is, you didn't respond to it. Have other rangers heard voices they recognized? Most of us have at one time or another. It's in the core protocols for a reason. The procedures exist because someone learned the pattern the hard way, figured out the safe response and wrote it down. We follow the list because the list works. June brought heat and the peak tourist season. Day shifts became exhausting. Hundreds of visitors, constant questions, photo assistants, lost children reunited with parents, heat exhaustion incidents. The contrast with overnight hours became even more pronounced. Days were bright chaos. Nights were structured silence. I'd been at Desert View for 4 months. The protocols were automatic now. I could recite all 25 core and amended rules from memory. I knew the timing of the patterns. Knocking on Tuesdays and Thursdays, footsteps during the new moon. Voices every night between 2 and 2:30. I knew how many steps the perimeter should be. I knew which shadows in the residence were normal and which meant I needed more light. I knew what the radio static sounded like when it was just atmospheric interference versus when something was wrong with the signal. I'd become good at this job. On June 19th, Mike mentioned during a weekend shift that he was leaving the park. Found a posting in Olympic, he said. Closer to my daughter. I start in August. You've been here 3 years. Yeah, that's long enough. You start to see patterns in the patterns, you know. Connections that might not be there. It's time to rotate out. He counted keys, 12 present. You'll be fine. You follow procedures better than most, just don't stay too long. This site rewards short-term assignments. How long is too long? Different for everyone. I'm at my limit. You'll know yours when you feel it. After Mike left, the weekend shifts became solo again. I didn't mind. The solitude was easier than managing 2 people's compliance with the protocols. On a Thursday night in late June at 10:15 p.m., the knocking came as expected. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Then it changed. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, and then a voice. I know you're in there. I froze. The protocols said not to respond. They said nothing about what to do if the knocking entity spoke. I saw you earlier, the voice continued. At the tower. You helped my family with directions. It was possible. I'd helped dozens of people that day. But the voice was muffled by the door, hard to identify. I need help, the voice said. My son wandered off. I think he went toward the canyon. Please, I just need to borrow a flashlight. Protocol 4. Do not respond to knocking between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. If someone identifies themselves as park staff, do not respond. If they use your name, do not respond. If they claim there is an emergency, use the radio on channel 14 to verify. I went to the radio. Desert View Night, channel 14, requesting verification of reported missing child on site. Garrett's response was immediate. Negative. No missing persons reports. No visitors on site after hours. Do not open the door. Copy, the voice outside said. I can hear you talking. Please, he's only 8 years old. I stayed at the desk. The voice continued for another 3 minutes, pleading, describing the child, becoming increasingly desperate. Then it stopped mid-sentence. Silence. At 11:45, I checked the tower lights. 3 visible, correct. At 1:30 a.m., the footsteps circled the building. 5 complete circuits, 176 steps, stopping at the northeast corner. At 2:15, the voices from the rim began. Tonight they were speaking in a language I didn't recognize. The rhythm sounded like conversation, questions and responses back and forth. At 3:30, my radio check was answered normally. At 5:30, my perimeter count was 207 steps. In my log, I noted 10:15 p.m., knocking with verbal component. Content claimed missing child. Verified with supervisor as false. Did not respond or open door. At dawn, Chen found no evidence of anyone having approached the residence during the night. No footprints, no disturbed gravel. The knocking talked tonight, I told her, the first time. For me. It'll try different approaches, whatever it thinks might work. Last year it told the previous ranger that his truck was being broken into. Year before that it claimed to be a hiker who'd fallen and broken a leg 20 feet from the door. She checked her equipment list. It's just testing. As long as you follow protocol, it can't do anything. Can't or doesn't? Does it matter? The result is the same. In July, Garrett brought another amendment. Supplemental Guidelines, Amendment Protocols, Additional. Effective July 8th. Append to existing protocols. Protocol 26. The watchtower contains historical displays and artifacts on the 2nd and 3rd floors. These displays should remain static. If you observe that objects have moved between your 6:30 p.m. perimeter check and your 5:30 a.m. perimeter check, note the specific items and locations in your log. Do not enter the tower to investigate. Day staff will document and reset displays. Protocol 27. If you observe lights inside the tower that you did not turn on, verify they are in expected locations per Protocol 5. If lights appear in the basement level or in locations not corresponding to any fixture, turn off the main breaker for the tower electrical system. The breaker box is in the maintenance room of the residence. After cutting power, verify all tower lights are extinguished. If any lights remain on after power is cut, radio channel 14. Protocol 28. The canyon contains multiple trails descending from the rim. From desert view, 3 trails are visible with binoculars. Tanner Trail to the southeast, Beamer Trail to the east, and an unmaintained Social Trail to the northeast. If you observe lights on any of these trails during overnight hours, note the trail and number of lights in your log. Do not attempt to make contact. If lights appear to be ascending rather than descending, radio channel 14 immediately. Are we expecting someone to climb at night? I asked. Garrett was reviewing my logs from the past month. No. Night hiking is prohibited in the canyon without permits, and we don't issue permits for ascent from the river during overnight hours. If you see lights climbing, it's not permitted activity. What is it? Something that shouldn't be climbing. He closed the logbook. You're coming up on 6 months. How are you holding up? Fine. Following procedures. Sleeping okay? Well enough. He looked at me for a long moment. You're one of the good ones. Disciplined, careful, no cowboy bullshit. But don't let this sight get into your head. The protocols work because they create distance. You observe, you document, you follow the list. You don't engage, you don't personalize, you don't start thinking of the anomalies as entities with intentions. They're just patterns, natural phenomena we don't fully understand. Keep that framework. Yes, sir. Mike left because he started to see patterns that connected across months. He started to think the site was communicating. That's the warning sign, when you stop seeing random events and start seeing narratives. If you get there, tell me. We'll rotate you out. After he left, I thought about narratives. The knocking that came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The footsteps that circled exactly 5 times. The voices that spoke in familiar tones. Were those patterns or communication? Natural phenomena or intention? The protocols said it didn't matter. The protocols worked either way. That night at 8:15, while I was conducting the inventory, I heard the satellite phone ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Protocol 23. If the phone rings during overnight hours, do not answer it. If it rings more than 3 times, disconnect the battery. 4 rings. I opened the equipment locker and disconnected the battery from the satellite phone. The ringing stopped. I noted it in the log. 8:17 p.m. satellite phone rang 4 times. Battery disconnected per protocol 23. At 11:45, when I checked the tower lights, I counted 4. The 4th light was in the basement window again, the one that shouldn't be visible from ground level. At midnight, I heard something land on the roof of the residence. Heavy impact, like a large animal jumping from height. It moved across the roof toward the north end. Scraping sounds, scratching. I added another lantern to the main room and sat at the desk. At 1:30, the footsteps circled the building. But tonight they didn't stop at 5 circuits, they continued. 6 circuits, 7, 8. At 8 complete circuits, I picked up the radio. Desert View Night, Channel 14. Anomalous pattern in progress, requesting guidance. Nature of anomaly? Garrett's voice. Circling footsteps exceeded standard pattern. Currently at 9 circuits and continuing. Maintain position. Do not investigate. Update me at 12 circuits. The footsteps continued. 9 circuits, 10, 11, 12. Desert View Night. 12 circuits complete. Pattern continuing. Copy. Do not open door. Do not attempt to observe. Maintain lights and position. 13 circuits. 14. 15. At 20 circuits, the footsteps stopped. Total silence. I waited. My watch showed 1:57 a.m. Then from directly outside the north wall where the scratches had been made during the storm, a voice spoke. You've been very good at following the rules. It was my voice, my exact voice, as if I were standing outside talking to myself. But you must be curious. 6 months is a long time to follow instructions without understanding them. I said nothing. I kept my eyes on the desk, on my logbook, on the radio. I can explain, I can show you. Just open the door. Protocol 4. Do not respond to knocking between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. If someone uses your name, do not respond. This wasn't knocking. This was my voice speaking from outside. You want to know what's in Shed B, my voice said. I can tell you, I can show you. All you have to do is open this door. I picked up the radio. Desert View Night, situation escalating. Entity using imitative voice requesting access. Do not respond to it, Garrett said. Do not acknowledge it. It cannot enter without invitation or breach. Maintain protocols. Copy. My voice outside laughed. It sounded exactly like my laugh. Garrett tells you to follow protocols, but he doesn't tell you why. He doesn't tell you what happens to rangers who stay too long. He doesn't tell you about Ortiz. Ortiz. The name from the notebook in the footlocker. The ranger who'd requested transfer in February. Ortiz saw, my voice said. He counted the circuits one night and they went to 30. And he opened the door to make it stop. Do you want to know what he saw? I stayed silent. We're not so different, you and I, my voice continued. We both follow patterns, we both observe, we both wait. The difference is I understand why. At 2:15, the voices from the rim began, but tonight they were louder, closer. They were coming from just beyond the fence, maybe 20 feet from the building. Your father died on Route 66, my voice said. But you knew that. What you don't know is that he died at 2:37 a.m. or the same time you hear the voices every night. That's not a coincidence. I focused on my breathing. In for 4. Hold for 4, out for 4. Open the door, my voice said, softer now. I'll show you why the timing matters. I'll show you what your father saw in those last moments. At 2:31, the voices stopped. At 2:40, my voice outside said, "I'll be back tomorrow, and the night after, and the night after that. You'll get tired eventually, everyone does, and when you do, I'll be here." Silence. At 3:30, my radio check was answered normally. Garrett asked if the situation had resolved. I confirmed. At 5:30, my perimeter count was 238 steps, well outside the range. Protocol 22. If your step count is more than 30 steps outside the acceptable range, do not enter the residence until sunrise. I waited on the porch. The sky lightened slowly, Venus bright in the east, then fading as the sun rose. When full daylight reached the compound, I went inside. On the desk was a handwritten note that hadn't been there before. The writing was mine. The paper was from my own notebook. The message said, "You should have opened the door." I burned the note in the sink and didn't document it in my log. That afternoon I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my own voice saying those things, using my inflections, my rhythms. The thing had studied me. It knew how I talked. At 4 p.m. I gave up on sleep and drove to the main village. I found Garrett in his office, working through a stack of permits. "I need to know about Ortiz," I said. Garrett looked up. "What about him?" "The entity last night mentioned him. Said he opened the door when the circuits went to 30. Ortiz requested transfer for personal reasons. He's stationed at Denali now. Doing fine." "But did he open the door?" Garrett set down his pen. "No. He counted 30 circuits, got spooked, and requested transfer the next day. He didn't break protocol, but he lost his nerve. There's a difference between following procedures because you trust them and following procedures because you're terrified not to. The second kind wears you down." "How long did Ortiz last?" 8 months. I'd been here 6 months. 2 months less than Ortiz. "Am I approaching my limit?" I asked. "Only you can answer that. But here's what I know. You're still following procedures exactly. You're not improvising, not testing boundaries, and not rationalizing exceptions. As long as that's true, you're okay. If you start feeling like the protocols are negotiable, tell me immediately." "What happens to rangers who stay too long?" "Most rotate out before it becomes a problem. A few have to be pulled for their own safety. One 20 years ago, before my time, disappeared. Left his post in the middle of a shift. We found him 3 days later hiking the Beamer Trail with no supplies, no memory of leaving. He said he was following someone he knew, but he was alone." "What did he see?" "He never said, or couldn't. He left the Park Service entirely, lives in Phoenix now, manages a hardware store." Garrett picked up his pen again. "The point is, this site is manageable with discipline, but it requires respect. You're doing fine. Don't overthink it." I drove back to Desert View and slept for 3 hours. When I woke, it was 5:45 p.m. My shift started in 15 minutes. I locked the door at 6:15. I counted the locks 3 times. I conducted my perimeter check at 6:30, moving clockwise. 4 doors. The night proceeded normally until 1:30 a.m. The footsteps came, circling clockwise. I counted circuits, 5 circuits, normal, then 6, 7, 8. I picked up the radio. "Desert View night, pattern exceeding standard count. Copy. Maintain position. 9 circuits, 10, 11, 12. At 15 circuits, my voice spoke from outside. "I told you I'd be back. 20 circuits, and you can't do this forever. 25 circuits. Eventually you'll make a mistake, everyone does. 30 circuits, the footsteps stopped. "Ortiz made it to 30 before he broke," my voice said. "Can you do better?" I stayed silent. The footsteps began again. 31, 32. At 40 circuits, my hands were shaking. I gripped the edge of the desk. At 50 circuits, my voice said, "Impressive, but you're only human." The footsteps continued. I lost count somewhere past 60. The circuits blurred together into one continuous loop, a pattern with no beginning or end. At some point, I'm not sure when, I realized I was counting my own heartbeat instead of the steps. At 2:15 a.m., the footsteps stopped. The voices from the rim began. They were speaking English tonight, fragments of conversation. Should have turned left. Too late now. Can you hear me? At 3:30, my radio check was normal. At 5:30, my perimeter count was 263 steps. I waited in the parking area until day staff arrived. Chen found me sitting on the bumper of my truck. Rough night? Getting that way. She didn't ask for details. You should take a few days off. Get off-site, clear your head. Garrett would approve it. Maybe. But I didn't request time off. I was afraid that if I left, I wouldn't come back. And despite everything, I wasn't ready to quit. August brought monsoon storms. The afternoon thunderheads built like purple mountains, dumping rain in sheets that lasted 20 minutes and then vanished, leaving the air clean and sharp. I'd been at Desert View for 7 months. The entity, I'd started thinking of it that way against Garrett's advice, had settled into a new pattern. It circled the residence between 30 and 50 times each night. It spoke in my voice, offering information, asking questions, describing things it claimed to know about my life. Most of it was verifiable truth. Details about my childhood, my father's death, my grandmother's medical expenses, things that could have been researched or observed. Some of it was not verifiable. Speculation about my thoughts, my fears, my reasons for staying at this job. Those claims were often accurate in ways that bothered me. I followed the protocols exactly. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I documented everything. On August 12th, Garrett brought final amendments. Supplemental guidelines, amendment protocols, final series, effective August 12th. These are the last scheduled amendments for this operational period. Protocol 29. If the circling footsteps exceed 100 circuits in a single night, activate Emergency Protocol E4 and increase interior lighting to maximum. Do not attempt to count past 100. Estimation is acceptable. Protocol 30. If you observe your own handwriting in the residence in locations where you did not write, do not read the content. Collect the material, seal it in an envelope, and store it in the locked equipment locker. Note the incident in your log. Day staff will dispose of materials safely. Protocol 31. Some rangers report a sensation of being watched from inside the residence despite verified empty rooms. This is common and not actionable. Increase lighting if needed. Do not search for sources. Protocol 32. If at any point you receive specific instructions that contradict the core protocols, whether via radio, written note, or verbal communication, assume the instructions are compromised. Follow the original core protocols until you can verify changes with the site supervisor in person. Protocol 33. Your assignment at Desert View has a recommended maximum duration of 12 months. As you approach this threshold, the site supervisor will discuss rotation options. Voluntary rotation is encouraged. If you choose to extend past 12 months, additional screening and protocols will be required. I'm at 7 months, I said. I know. These are just precautionary. Most rangers do 8 to 10 months and rotate naturally. A few go the full 12. Garrett reviewed my logs. You're still performing well. Procedures are exact. Documentation is thorough. But I want you thinking about what comes after this, where you want to be next. Don't stay because you're stubborn. Stay because it's the right assignment. It's the right assignment. For now, keep evaluating. That night, the footsteps went to 73 circuits. My voice outside recited passages from my college essays, descriptions I'd written about the canyon during my application to the Park Service. Word-for-word quotations from documents I'd submitted months ago. You wrote that the canyon represents geological time made visible, my voice said. But you didn't understand what that means. Time isn't just visible here, it's accessible, it's permeable. That's what the protocols protect you from. Not me, but time itself. I increased the lighting and didn't respond. At 3:30, my radio check was answered by a voice that wasn't Garrett's. Desert View Night, status clear, the voice said. It was close to Garrett's voice, but not exact. The cadence was wrong. I keyed the mic 3 times without speaking and switched to receive only. 5 minutes later, Garrett's actual voice came through. Desert View Night, this is actual supervisor. Disregard previous transmission, verify status. Status secure. Previous transmission did not match authentication. Copy, well done, stay sharp. At dawn, I found 3 envelopes sealed and sitting on my desk. I didn't remember sealing them. Inside were notes in my handwriting describing procedures that didn't exist. False protocols with specific instructions to open doors at specific times. I locked them in the equipment locker and reported it to Chen. It's escalating, she said. That's normal around 7 or 8 months. It's testing harder, just keep following the list. How much harder does it get? Different for everyone, but it peaks and then it usually subsides. You're probably near the peak now. September was cooler, the tourist traffic beginning to thin. I'd been at Desert View for 8 months. The entity was circling over 100 times most nights now. I stopped counting and estimated. My voice outside had stopped offering information and started making demands. Open the door. Let me in. You know you want to understand. I followed Protocol 29 and kept maximum lighting. On September 24th at 1:45 a.m., I heard something different. Scratching at the door. Not on the walls, directly on the door itself. Low down at the base, like something was trying to dig under it. I went to the window and looked out carefully. An animal crouched at the door. It looked like a coyote at first glance. The right size, the right coloring. But its legs bent wrong. Its back legs bent forward like front legs, and it was scratching at the door with what should have been hind paws. I stepped back from the window. The scratching continued for 6 minutes, then stopped. At 2:15, the voices from the rim spoke in my father's voice. Just his voice tonight, no others. He was describing the accident, the moment of impact, the sound of breaking glass. I turned off the radio speakers and used headphones on channel 14. At 3:30, my check was normal. At 5:30, my perimeter count was 312 steps. I waited in the parking area. The sun rose. Chen arrived with the day shift. You look terrible, she said. Bad night. Garrett wants to see you today. He said it's not urgent, but it's important. I drove to the village and found Garrett in his office. He had a folder open on his desk, my personnel file. You're at 8 months, he said. Strong performance throughout. But I want to talk about what's next. I'm planning to finish the year. That's 4 more months, are you sure? I'm following protocols, I'm managing the stress, I want to complete a full 12-month assignment. Garrett studied me. The site is escalating with you. That's normal, but it means the next 4 months will be harder than the last 8. I need you to understand what you're committing to. I understand. I don't think you do. He pulled out a document, a medical report. This is from a ranger who did 14 months here 6 years ago. By month 12, he was sleeping 3 hours a night, losing weight, seeing patterns in everything. By month 13, he stopped filing logs. We found him in the tower at 3 a.m., trying to open a door that didn't exist. He was hospitalized for dehydration and exhaustion. What happened to him? He recovered. He works in administration now, won't take field assignments. He followed every protocol correctly, but the site still got to him. Time is the vulnerability. The longer you're here, the more the site has to work with. Then why not rotate everyone at 6 months? Because some rangers can handle 12, a few can handle more. And we need people who can do long-term assignments. The consistency is important for site stability. But you have to be honest about your limits. I thought about my limits, about lying awake listening to my own voice outside, about the coyote with backward legs, about notes appearing in my handwriting that I didn't remember writing. 4 more months, I said, then I'll rotate. Okay, but we're adding a weekly check-in. Every Sunday you meet with me in person, we review your logs together and you tell me honestly how you're handling it. If I see signs you're compromised, I pull you immediately. Non-negotiable. Agreed. October was colder, the first hard freezes at night. I'd been at Desert View for 9 months. The weekly check-ins with Garrett became routine. He reviewed my logs, asked about my sleep, my appetite, my stress levels. I answered honestly, sleep was poor but adequate, appetite was fine. Stress was high but manageable. The entity had changed tactics. It wasn't trying to lure me out anymore, it was trying to exhaust me. The circling footsteps went over 200 circuits some nights. My voice outside spoke for hours without stopping, describing things in detail. The interior of the residence, the contents of my desk, the equipment in the lockers. Accurate descriptions of things it shouldn't have been able to see. On October 15th at midnight, my voice outside said, "I know what's in Shed B." I didn't respond. "It's a door," my voice said. "Not to another room, to another time." Mary Coulter built the watchtower as a marker, but Shed B was the real project. She was trying to stabilize the permeable boundary. It didn't work. It made things worse. I documented the content, but didn't engage. The next night, my voice said, "The protocols aren't protecting you from me, they're protecting you from what's on the other side of the boundary. I'm just the exhaust, the side effect. The thing you can observe because it's safe enough to observe." At 3:30 a.m., my radio check was answered by my own voice. "Desert View night, status clear," my voice said from the speaker. I keyed the mic 3 times and switched to receive only. Garrett's actual voice came through. "Disregard previous transmission. Actual supervisor confirms status clear." At dawn, I found my logbook open to a page I'd written 3 months ago. A new entry had been added in my handwriting, dated today, describing events that hadn't happened yet. I locked it in the equipment locker and reported it. "It's getting sophisticated," Garrett said during our Sunday check-in. "Using your voice on the radio, writing in your logbook. These are advanced patterns. You're at the peak of escalation." "How much longer does the peak last?" "Usually 2 to 3 weeks. Then it subsides or plateaus, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that it won't subside, that this is the new normal." "I can handle it." "I believe you can. But handling it and being healthy are different things. I need you watching for signs that you're rationalizing. If you start thinking the entity makes sense, if you start considering its offers, if you start feeling like the protocols are arbitrary, tell me immediately." "I will." November brought the first snow. Light dustings that melted by noon but signaled the coming winter. I'd been at Desert View for 10 months. The entity had plateaued at a high level of activity. 200 circuits most nights. Hours of voice communication, false radio transmissions, fake log entries. I documented everything and followed protocols. But I was tired. Deep tired. The kind that doesn't improve with sleep. On November 8th at 2:30 a.m., my voice outside said something different. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to warn you." I didn't respond. The boundary is failing. The protocols won't hold much longer. When it fails, what's on the other side will come through. You need to be gone before that happens. I documented it and continued my shift. The next night, the protocols were written for a different era. when the boundary was stronger. It's weaker now. Every year it gets weaker. The protocols are outdated. I radioed Garrett on Channel 14. Entity claiming protocols are outdated. Claiming boundary failure. The protocols are current and effective. Do not accept entity claims as valid information. This is a known escalation pattern, undermining confidence in procedures. Copy. But the entity's claim bothered me. What if the protocols were outdated? What if the boundary, whatever that meant, was actually failing? On November 15th, during my Sunday check-in, Garrett said, "You're showing signs of compromise. I'm following every protocol." Yes, but you're starting to engage with entity claims as if they're data points worth analyzing. They're not. They're noise. Sophisticated noise, but still noise. How do you know they're noise? Because the protocols work. We verify that daily. No ranger following procedures has ever been seriously harmed at this site. The entity can't affect you except through your own decision to break protocol. That's not a failing boundary, that's a working boundary. Then why does it feel like it's getting stronger? Because you're tired and you've been listening to it for 10 months. It's not getting stronger. You're getting weaker. That's normal. That's why we rotate people. 2 more months. 2 more months, Garrett agreed. But we're increasing check-ins to twice weekly. And I want you taking 1 full day off per week, getting off-site, sleeping somewhere else. I agreed. I started driving to Flagstaff on Tuesdays, sleeping in a hotel, eating in restaurants, being around people who didn't hear voices or count footsteps. It helped. A little. December was cold and quiet. Winter tourists were rare. The canyon filled with snow. Layer on layer of white on red rock. I'd been at Desert View for 11 months. The entity was still escalating, but I'd learned to tune it out. My voice outside became background noise like wind or the hum of the refrigerator. The footsteps were just rhythm. The false radio transmissions and fake log entries were predictable enough that I'd developed a checklist to identify them. On December 10th at 1 a.m., something new happened. The lights in the residence flickered, not a power surge, a pattern. 3 flickers, pause, 3 flickers. I checked the breaker box, everything was normal. The lights flickered again. Same pattern. I radioed Channel 14. Desert View night, electrical anomaly, lights flickering in pattern. Maintain position. Do not investigate. Increase backup lighting. I set up additional lanterns. The flickering continued intermittently for 2 hours. At 3 a.m., all the lights went out at once. Complete darkness. Protocol E4. During power failure, maintain at least 2 light sources active in the residence at all times. Do not allow the residence to remain in complete darkness for more than 2 minutes. I grabbed the emergency lantern and switched it on. Then the backup flashlight. Both worked. The main power stayed off. I checked my watch. 3:02 a.m. Outside, my voice said, "The boundary just failed." I increased the lantern brightness and activated the chemical light sticks. "You should leave now," my voice said, "while you still can." I stayed in the residence and followed emergency protocols. At 3:15, the main power came back on. The lights blazed bright. I conducted an immediate inventory. All equipment present, all doors secure, all windows intact. But something felt different. The air pressure had changed, or the acoustic quality, or something I couldn't name. At 3:30, my radio check was answered by Garrett's voice. Normal authentication. "Confirm status," Garrett said. "Power failure from 3:02 to 3:15. Maintained backup lighting. No breach. Residence secure." "Copy. Day staff will check electrical systems. You did everything right." At dawn, the electrical contractor found nothing wrong with the system. No explanation for the power failure. "It shouldn't have gone out," he said. "And it shouldn't have come back on without someone resetting the breaker. But here we are." My last night at Desert View was December 29th, 11 months and 29 days. I'd agreed with Garrett to finish December and rotate to a new assignment in January. Olympic National Park, the same posting Mike had taken. A fresh start, different protocols, different patterns. I'd spent the day packing my personal items, cleaning the residence, updating the operations manual with notes for the next ranger. A woman named Sarah, transferring from Yellowstone, experienced with remote overnight assignments. At 6:15 p.m., I locked the door for the last time. I checked it 3 times. At 6:30, I conducted my final perimeter check, moving clockwise. 4 doors, all secure. The night proceeded normally until 1:30 a.m. The footsteps began, but tonight they weren't circling. They were walking directly to the door. Heavy, measured steps. They approached from the direction of the canyon and stopped at the door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Then my voice. "I need to show you something before you leave." I didn't respond. 12 months, my voice said. "You made it. You followed every rule. You earned the right to understand." I sat at the desk and focused on my breathing. Ortiz didn't make it to 12 months. Mike didn't make it to 4 years. The ranger who disappeared lasted 15 months before he broke. But you have the discipline. You have the control. You deserve to know what you've been protecting. I checked my watch. 1:43 a.m. "Open the door," my voice said, not demanding, almost gentle. "Let me show you what's in Shed B. Let me show you what Mary Coulter was really building. Let me show you why the protocols exist." I stayed silent. This is your last chance, your last night. After tonight, you'll never know. You'll spend the rest of your life following rules you don't understand, protecting boundaries you can't see, obeying protocols written by people who never explained why. At 2:15, the voices from the rim began. But tonight they were speaking in unison, dozens of voices saying the same words. "Let him show you. Let him show you. Let him show you." I turned off the radio speakers and used headphones. At 2:30, the voices stopped. My voice outside said, "You're afraid. That's wise. Fear is appropriate. But you're also curious. After 11 months, you must be curious." I was curious. I'd been curious since March. I'd wondered about Shed B, about the 5th door in the tower, about the backward-walking elk, about the voice that knew my father's last moments. But curiosity wasn't sufficient reason to break protocol. "Garrett will never tell you," my voice said. "The next site will have different rules but the same structure. Observe, document, comply, rotate. You'll spend your career following procedures without understanding them. Is that really what you want?" At 3:30 a.m., I conducted my radio check. "Desert View night, 3:30 check. Copy Desert View, status clear," Garrett's voice. "Last check of your assignment. You've done outstanding work." "Thank you, sir. See you at dawn." At 4 a.m., my voice outside said, "You know what happens if you open this door?" I stayed silent. Nothing happens because there is no entity, there is no boundary, there's just you following rules, protecting yourself from yourself. Your own fear given form. The protocols work because they give you structure in an empty, indifferent universe. That's all this is, that's all it's ever been. At 5:30 a.m., I conducted my final perimeter check, moving counterclockwise. 204 steps. Perfect. I returned to the residence and waited for dawn. At 6:30, Garrett arrived with Sarah, the new ranger. I walked her through the residence, the equipment, the protocols. I gave her my notebook with 11 months of observations and notes. "Follow the list exactly," I said. "Don't test exceptions, don't improvise, don't engage with anything that tries to engage with you." "Understood?" It will use familiar voices, it will make offers, it will claim to have information you need. It's lying. or it's telling the truth in a way that doesn't matter. Either way, follow protocols. I will. I looked at the residence one last time. 11 months. 336 nights. Approximately 67,000 footsteps circling the building. Hundreds of hours of my own voice speaking from outside. Countless false transmissions, fake log entries, and anomalous events. All documented, all managed, all survived through disciplined compliance with a list of rules I still didn't fully understand. As Garrett and I walked to his truck, I looked back at Shed B. The padlock was secure, the door was closed. I would never know what was inside. "You did good," Garrett said. "One of the best assignments I've supervised. You should be proud." "What happens to the site now?" "Sarah will follow the same protocols. The site will continue operating. We'll update the procedures as needed. It's a stable system." "Is the boundary actually failing?" Garrett looked at me. "What boundary?" The entity claimed, "There is no entity. There are patterns, phenomena, and procedures. You know this. Don't let the last night undo 11 months of good practice." We drove back to the village in silence. I cleaned out my locker, submitted my final paperwork, and accepted transfer orders to Olympic. 2 weeks later, I was in Washington, learning new protocols for different terrain. Rainforest instead of desert, bears instead of whatever had been at Desert View. But sometimes at night I still hear footsteps circling my apartment. Sometimes I count them, and sometimes I wonder if I should have opened the door. Not because I think the entity was telling the truth, but because I'll never know what truth I was protecting myself from by following the rules. Sarah lasted 4 months at Desert View. She requested transfer after a night when the circling footsteps exceeded 300 circuits and didn't stop until dawn. The ranger after her lasted 6 months. The current ranger has been there 8 months and counting. Garrett says the site is stable, the protocols are working. Everything is proceeding normally. I believe him. I have to believe him. Because if the protocols were wrong, if the boundary was actually failing, if the entity was actually offering truth rather than temptation, then I spent 11 months protecting myself from understanding something essential about the canyon, about time, about the thin places where geological history becomes permeable. But that's not how I think about it anymore. I think about it this way. I was given a job. I was given clear procedures. I followed them exactly. I survived. I rotated out. I moved forward. The protocols worked. That's all that matters. That's all that can matter. Because once you start questioning whether the rules serve the right purpose, once you start wondering if compliance is wisdom or cowardice, once you let curiosity override discipline, that's when you stop being a ranger and become something else. Something that walks toward voices in the dark. Something that opens doors that should stay closed. Something that counts circuits past the point where counting has meaning. I followed the protocols. I survived Desert View, and I'm writing this now. Not as a warning, not as an explanation, but as a record. For the next ranger who spends 11 months listening to their own voice outside the door. For the next person who will be curious and disciplined and exhausted. Follow the list. Count the steps. Check the locks. Don't open the door, not because you'll die if you do, but because you'll never know for certain whether you should have. And that uncertainty, that permanent, unanswerable question is a worse fate than any entity, any boundary, any phenomenon the canyon might contain. Trust the protocols. They work. They have to work. Because if they don't, then none of us who followed them will ever know what we were really protecting. Or what we were really protecting it from.